I was just pretty burnt out. We were trying to gear up for a big Series A. A friend of mine was like, "Oh, you should go check out this silent retreat."
Hi Hector, thank you for coming in today. And can you tell me your name, age, and where you're from?
For sure, I am Hector Hughes. I'm 27, and I grew up in the British countryside in the Cotswolds.
What are you working on at this time?
So at this time, I am working on Unplugged. We are actually in one of our cabins today. So that, this is it.
So this is actually what you're working on.
This is it. I didn't build this one, but we have 11 of these now.
What would you say are your strengths and weaknesses?
I think one thing that I hold a lot of value is I think I'm a nice guy. At the end of the day, it's definitely a strength and a weakness. Don't really have people problems, and so many problems are people problems. But I find that just kind of taking responsibility, so assume everything's my fault, and then everyone's a kind of collaborator rather than a competitor. Weakness, I think I don't have great attention to detail, so I get.
You wouldn't say. You wouldn't say.
This is someone else's attention to detail.
Oh, it's not you.
Yeah.
If you could have any superpower, we're going superhero stuff now. What would it be?
I think it would be anytime you walk into a room, everyone in there just feels amazing.
Oh, that's nice.
Which I think you kind of can do with smiling,
You kind of
smiling is very infectious. If you smile and you feel good, then it's easy to breathe. I'm not saying I can do that, but
yeah. It sounds like a superpower from a children's show, which is very cute. Like my daughter would love this. And tell me a time that you made a mistake.
Yeah, so I had it was, strengths and weaknesses, but I had about a decade from 15 to 25 where I just didn't really take my life seriously, In hindsight.
You're 27 now, so that's not long ago.
Just about figuring it out now, but yeah, I just used to kind of live life not on my terms, and I know it's not a specific mistake, but I think for all that time, I just thought I've always been very optimistic, so I always thought something would happen eventually. But I never really did anything about it. And so I just kind of went along and, I would drink a lot, take a lot of drugs, and, just meant that I kind of got to a stage where I was burnt out and unfulfilled. And I really just didn't feel like I wasn't really sure in myself. So that was, in hindsight, a mistake. But then, I think what I'm doing now wouldn't be possible without having gone through that. So I certainly did.
Yeah. Do you find that time actually helped you a lot?
I now, I don't judge anyone. There's no one where I would kind of look down on, because I've seen myself do so much stupid shit in the past. And then I also think it really does kind of give me some drive now. I feel like I'm kind of making up for lost time, which I guess is not very on brand, but I do. I feel a kind of urgency.
I do feel the same. It's bad though.
I do feel like every entrepreneur that's in there somewhere, right? It's just not a rational. It's not a rational kind of life. I'm sure there's a little bit of that driving.
I think something came up with when I interview other people, and it was, what's the difference? Do you think there is a difference between an entrepreneur and a businessman?
I think words are very useful because they do kind of paint these pictures in our mind. And I actually think that entrepreneur is very it's very fashionable now. Maybe over glamorized actually. I think an entrepreneur, you're kind of trying to create something new in the world. You're kind of push boundaries and and really trying to solve a problem. Whereas businessman is really just kind of running a successful business, making money, and absolutely no problem with that at all. Again, I don't think there's any right approach, but it feels like with being an entrepreneur, you're kind of going into uncharted territory.
How do you actually feel about the product?
Yeah.
How would you describe, for instance, the guy in three words?
I would describe him as visionary, difficult,
yes,
and genuine, I think.
Genuine, yeah, himself.
Yeah. He gets a bad rep, but I genuinely think he's doing it for all the right reasons.
Anyone else you would think we can use instead of him?
Well, I mean, he's obviously a very topical one, but I think there's lots of kind of fantastic entrepreneurs out there. I really I know you live in Ireland, I really like Patrick Collison from Stripe.
Oh yeah.
And very different to him because Elon, is very ego-led, right? Like I think
he's a public figure.
He's a public figure, and there's a lot of I'm sure there's a lot of kind of childhood, not to psychoanalyze him, stuff that he's kind of making up for. Whereas Patrick Collison is very intellectually humble. So I just think it kind of breeds a completely different company and approach. So
my team actually did a small background check, nothing too daunting.
So this is I applied to 20 startups and one of them offered me a job, and that was Nobly POS, and it was turned out to be a fantastic experience. So I joined in sales. So my job, it was basically iPad till systems for restaurants. And
oh yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So my job was to spend Monday and Tuesday cold calling restaurants and cafes in London, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday going to pitch to them. And I was rubbish at it. And
I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, but I did it for a year. Still been bad at it. They kind of, I think they took pity on me, and again I was quite nice.
Oh, because you're a nice guy, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they thought we'll leave Hector around.
You're the worst to fire because it's I have to fire that nice guy. He's total rubbish, but he's so nice.
Yeah, my boss, 2 years later, my boss was doing a speech and mentioned me, and he's like, "Oh, we were going to fire Hector back in the day," but they didn't. I was like, "Yeah, look, guys, I'm a good sales guy." So they put me in charge of the product, so how everything works. We had a development team in Uruguay, and that evolved into a growth role. So I ended up running growth. In that year, we launched in the US and Australia. So it was super exciting, but again, behind the scenes, a bit messy. And then at the end of that year, I was just pretty burnt out. We were trying to gear up for a big Series A, high burn. So pressure was on, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh, you should go check out this silent retreat in the Himalayas."
Oh yeah, actually, yeah. In 2019, I went to a silent retreat in the Himalayas.
Yeah.
But can you talk about it, or is it a silent retreat where you have to be silent about the retreat?
No, this one you can.
Okay, you can talk about it. Oh, nice, great. So what happened there?
It's very picturesque. It's like a Buddhist temple on top of a mountain, just in some kind of forest. So really beautiful. There's a lot of people. There was I was doing a course called Intro to Buddhism. And there was 80 people there. And then we had a German monk who gave the kind of initial talk, so it's very surreal.
Very efficient?
Very efficient, yeah. So it was half meditation, half Buddhist philosophy. So, we'd spend 3 or 4 hours a day being taught Buddhism and 3 or 4 hours a day meditating. For the first 4 or 5 days, I was like, yeah, okay, fine, yeah, I get it, but not life-changing. But then halfway through, they started talking about the Buddhist theory of attachment, which is I need this to be happy, and that just blew my mind. I was like, fuck, it just explained my whole life up until then. I was feeling very kind of frustrated with where I was in life, and just thought these next things would make me happy, which of course is not true, but it's such a hard thing to get off. And then the last 2 days were intense meditation, so it was 6 or 7 hours a day meditation, and I just came out of that buzzing, just grinning, it was crazy.
I know, it happened to me as well.
So you come back on the cloud, and I came back, and 2 days after I came back, the Series A fell through, so we had to close the US and Australian office that night. And then I was running growth at the time. We paused all marketing spend, so I spent a week just twiddling my thumbs. And then I went for a drink with Ben, who's my now co-founder. He'd been at the startup, but he'd left the year before. I told him about this retreat. He's not the kind of guy you'd find at a retreat anytime soon. And we spoke about how there's a lot of stigma around retreats and meditation. It's quite a big jump for people to make. And a lot of the benefit is just getting people offline and into nature. And then, we kind of heard about these cabins, tiny houses in other countries, and just thought the two married together really nicely. So, the idea for Unplugged was born. And literally I spent 3 hours Googling cabins on a Friday night. And then I was like, yeah, this will probably work, and quit my job on Monday.
What do you think are the main characteristics that a leader should have?
Fundamentally, I especially think in startups, the leader is a supporting role, not the star of the show. Easy for me to say that all here on camera, but fundamentally, I've got a lot to learn. I think I'm an inexperienced leader, but I think when it has gone well, I've kind of been supportive and helped.
Yeah.
Once you have great people in the team, then it's really about trusting them and just kind of being there, helping everyone understand why they're doing this. I think that's super important. Yeah, and just really kind of being a rock, I think.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible manager. Like,
oh yeah.
If I try and like micromanage, I would so badly. Yeah.
But I don't think we should build managers, anyways. I think we should make leaders, right? Sure. So you want people to follow your vision, and people should really manage themselves. I think
and it's much more powerful, you know. Like, right? you can just get a lot more done.
They're not children, you know. they have a brain; they can do whatever they want. Yeah. If I called your mom or your a friend, what would they say is your most annoying habit?
That's a good question. What would they say is my most annoying habit? Very hard to get hold of, I'm sure.
Oh, flakiness.
Never on my phone. So you can't ring me. You know?
You don't have a phone?
It's locked in a box all the time.
They're serious?
Sometimes.
No, you don't have a phone.
But like evenings it's not on, or like mornings. So like.
Oh, you switch off the phone?
Yeah, switch off the phone. Like I get off all technology at like 6.
So 6?
It's probably quite annoying for people, but actually people get used to it.
So you do practice what you preach?
Yeah, I love reading, so like you just can't read when your phone's there because you're just constantly distracted. So like ideal evening is just...
I've read a novel.
I used to, I was actually a pretty dyslexic kid, and I have a twin sister who's like, you know, an incredible reader. She reads books, you know, in hours. So it was never really like my thing, but then like 3 or 4 years ago, I listened to a podcast with Naval Ravikant. He was talking about reading and just what a wonderful thing it is to do. And he had one bit of advice, which was read what you love until you love to read. And like for whatever reason, that just like flipped a switch in my mind, because I'd always been like trying to force my way through books. Like you feel like this is the book you need to read, and then it feels like a chore.
Yeah.
And then like it develops, then you kind of progress onto the stuff you should have been reading to start with. So I now get a huge amount of value out of reading, you know.
So I found this post that says that there are certainly the what the fuck are we doing days as a founder, but also these might just work days. Can you remember a what the fuck day?
So many. I'll tell you my worst, which was, so last year we raised a pre-seed round, which was like 300k, and I spent that in 2 or 3 months on cabins. Cabins are expensive. So last summer we like badly ran out of money. Like there were cabins still like coming off the conveyor. You know, in hindsight, I could have just had staff. And we had about 150k due in like the next 2 weeks, and I had like 2 investors who between them it would be like 200k, and I was like, I'm sure these guys are going to come in. So it was like on the road, and you know when you're on the road, you're like sometimes kind of checking email, and there's, your mind's quite cluttered anyway. And then in that afternoon, both of them dropped out.
Did you get an email?
Yeah.
2 emails?
2 emails.
Oh, I hate those emails.
I just have I had some crypto left, some like Bitcoin from 2017, so I had like 40k left, and I was like, I will liquidate all of that tomorrow. That's 40k.
Seems like liquidating now.
It was good timing. And then I was just like, what the fuck am I gonna do? So like that was the only night running the business where I like woke up stressed at the night, and I went for a walk for an hour. It's just like, fuck, what are we doing? But then literally the next day, like conversations that I thought were dead, like people came in,
yeah.
And like that week afterwards, like it all came together, and we kind of
put that out.
In normal life, optionality is great, and like you want to hedge your bets and all of these things. But as a founder, I actually think the opposite. Mm-hmm. And actually the best thing I did was put all of the crypto into on funds, because then you're all in, like there's no way back. You haven't got a choice.
Yeah, find a way to success.
Yeah, sure. Now?
Yeah, you can start, yeah.
It's just there. Done.
Oh wow. That's pretty good.
Check the links in the description to learn more about Pop-Up. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.
How do you think the whole interview process went?
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if I got it. I think it was nice to meet Matteo, but I think he was obviously looking for someone a bit older maybe, and a bit more bit less British, if I'm being honest. I felt like he held that against me, but you never know.
How would you feel working with him as a person?
Every day.
Every day.
I know he works remote, so I think that could work. And if we saw each other like once a month, maybe, like he's a great guy to spend a day with. But I probably not in an office.
No, too much.
Too much, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming in, and best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Cheers,
Fingers
mate.
crossed.